it can be intimidating when you're getting into paint correction and polishing. So in this video, I want to cover 3 simple tips that you can use to give you more confidence the next time you're working on your vehicle. Any of the tools and products that I mentioned or anything that'll help you out will be down in the video description box below. So let's go ahead and get started. So those 4 tips are gonna be: 1, keep the pad flat on the surface at all times. If it's not flat, it's not working. Keep the pad rotating at all times. If it's not rotating, it's not working. Keep the polisher moving at all times. That way you can decrease the chances of you burning through your clear coat, as that's one of the biggest problems people face when they pick up a polisher. And number 4 is use minimal down pressure. Now, this is more for beginner level detailers, or if you're just getting into polishing. Some of these tips you can kind of finesse as you get more experience, but for starting points, just to lay down the foundational work of picking up a polisher and putting it to use, those 4 things, if you just follow those, your life will be much, much easier. Okay, so I switched to a yellow pad so you can better see it. So tip number 1 is keep the pad flat on the surface. So what this means is you literally want this pad to be flat on where you're working. So not like, don't put more of an emphasis on keeping the polisher straight, but more so make sure the pad is flat on the surface. So depending on the vehicle that you work on, the contours, the curves, the sections, like it's gonna differ on how you move the polisher to keep the pad flat. So although you might have to like raise the polisher, lower it, slide it, but as long as the pad is flat on the surface and it's making contact with the panel, that's what you're looking for. Over time, you'll really get to finesse like how you hold the polisher and how you put the pad to the surface that you're working on, whether it's with a 1 inch, a 3 inch, a 5 inch, a rotor. Like things will change, especially depending on just how many curves or how intricate the surfaces that you're working on. But as a general, just simple tip is just always keep the pad flat on the surface. If it's not flat and you have it lifted up a little bit, it's not gonna rotate as much, which goes into our next point. But the first point before that is just keep the pad flat on the surface. Even if you're working on a raised area like here, the pad isn't necessarily touching this section, the back half, but this section is flat on the surface. So that's what like over time you'll get more experience, but it's not so much of like, is my polisher, it's like, is the pad itself flat on the surface? That's tip number 1. So tip number 2 is, as the pad remains flat on the surface, it always needs to rotate in order for the correction or the polishing to actually occur. So what I mean by rotating, I literally mean like this thing actually has to be going in a circular motion in order for it to do its job. So again, going back to like, depending on a raised area, the intricate area, you'll have to move the polisher around to keep that pad rotating. So, you know, if you're working for instance, like this small section here, you'll hold it differently than if you're working this flat section right here, right? But it's like whatever part of the pad is making contact with the panel, that section has to stay flat on the panel and rotating on that section. So, you know, if you only have a 5 inch polisher and you're working this small little area right here, you're gonna make sure that this portion of the pad, this upper part of the pad, is flat on this little edge here, and that it remains rotating. This whole other section, like 75% of the pad, is not gonna be touching the panel. But again, it's a portion that you're working on that matters, that it's flat and that it's rotating. So that's what I mean. Most of the pad is actually lifted off the panel, but on this part that you're working on, it's flat and it's rotating, so it's doing its job and actually correcting or polishing. All right, so tip number 3 is keep the polisher moving. This is where a lot of people get scared, because the main problem is like, man, I don't want to burn through my paint, I don't want to damage my paint. So again, still keep it in mind of tip 1 and 2, keep the pad flat, keep the pad rotating so it's actually doing its job. The problem with polishing paint is overheating the panels, right? There's a few other ones, but let's just say overheating the panels. So not an easy way, but an easy way to correct that is if you don't have the polisher in one spot for too long, you're not gonna create any heat, right? So when I say keep the polisher moving, in the most literal sense, mean keep the polisher moving, right? Don't like just sit there and let it rotate or let it work on one specific section, especially if you're working out in the sun or just in not ideal environments where the panel is really hot. It's gonna you're really gonna heat up the panel. So if you're working in a shaded area, that'll help out because it gives you more time to work on that section without overheating it. But if you are in the sun and the panel is already kind of hot, you want to have a more, you just want to be more proactive and not let the polisher stay on one section to not allow for more overheating, because the overheating part is what's gonna get you in a bad situation. So if you're in a shaded area, if the panel is cool, you generally speaking have more time to work with it. You're not gonna heat it up as much, but you still wanna kind of check, inspect the paint. If you're out in the sun, if the panel is already kind of hot from the weather, you have less time to work the section, and you want to more frequently, or you want to just make sure that that polisher is always moving. Now, the way you're gonna check if the surface is overheating is literally just doing just literally putting your hand to the paint and seeing how hot it gets. So, it should never get to the point where you're like, oh man, this is really hot, because that's too much. Not that you're gonna burn the paint by any means, but it's like, again, if you're out in the sun, like as we're mobile detailers, like we're stuck in that situation plenty of times, is if the panel's already hot, we're not gonna polish it as long, or we're gonna work in smaller sections in a shorter time frame. Meaning, if we're in a shop environment where there's shade and the panels are cool, we can work this entire section and do 1 or 2 full passes. If we're working outside in the sun and we're working on the side of the vehicle that's already hot, we're gonna have to work in this small section right here and maybe do 1 pass, wipe it down, and inspect, just because the heat level. So when you're working, keep the polisher moving at all times. Don't just let it sit there because you see a scratch and you're like, okay, I'm gonna press down here and I'm gonna keep it right here. I'm not gonna say like if you do that, you're gonna instantly burn through the paint. But as a beginner level detailer and getting into polishing, just keep the pad moving. I would rather you do this multiple times to get that one little scratch out, or that little section to get it better corrected, versus keeping the pad like this. Again, for starters, over time, you're gonna break a lot of rules. You'll do what you can. You'll learn your own ways of correcting and polishing. But for beginners, I would say just keep the pad, keep the polisher moving at all times. Now, as far as arm movement goes, it really depends. Again, one for sure, the temperature outside, the panel, that's gonna play a role in it, because if it's really hot, you can't just go at this speed because you're gonna cause too much heat because the panel's already hot. If it's in a shaded, if the panels are cool to the touch, well then you can probably move a little, you can move at a slow rate because you have more time to work the product in, you have more time to work the product into the paintwork without overheating it. But as a general rule of thumb, I mean, I can't tell you what the actual speed is, because again, it could also be if you're working on hard clear coat or soft clear coat. Because if you're working on soft clear coat, meaning the swirls and scratches get pulled off the paint very easily, then you don't have to move so slow, because it doesn't require that much work to get the swirls and scratches out. Now, if you're working on hard clear coat, meaning it takes a lot more work to get those swirls and scratches out of the paint work, you're gonna have to move a bit slower, because the clear coat that you have on the vehicle just takes more time to pull those swirls and scratches out. So between the temperature, between the condition, between the type of clear coat that you have, will really dictate how fast or how slow you have the arm movement. So I'm not gonna say a specific section like, hey, move it at 1 second per inch or whatever. Nothing like that. But it's more so you wanna kind of test to see what works and then kind of follow that method across the entire vehicle. And tip number 4 is the amount of down pressure that you use when you're actually polishing the paint. So to keep things super simple, is the amount of down pressure that you should be using is just enough to put the polisher to the panel, and that's it. You just need enough down pressure to confidently hold the polisher on the paint, but you don't need to press it down. When they say like let the pad and polisher do the work, it's like, just if you have the pad flat on the surface, if it's rotating, if you keep it moving, it's doing the work for you. Now, yes, over time, as you get more experience, as you build up your confidence, you'll be able to finesse the down pressure, right? Depending on the area that you're working on, depending on, what you're cutting or the combination of pad and combo that you have. But just as a simple, you're just getting into it, it's one of your first times going to the garage with a polisher and putting it on the vehicle, I'm gonna say just enough pressure to confidently hold the polisher on the surface. Now, if you see that's not really giving you the result that you want, or it's just not really giving you the results, then that's when you start to, okay, let me put a bit more down pressure and let's see how that goes. But it's better to start off with the most minimal pressure and then work your way up and just put a bit more down pressure, right? So you never, until you build up that confidence and experience, you don't have to put your whole body weight to it. That's definitely not what you need to do. I don't really like saying this, but it's like let the polisher and pad do the work. The reason why I don't like saying that is because I'm still the one holding the machine up and everything, right? So it's like I'm doing the work. But when they say, you know, let the pad and polisher do the machine, it's like just enough down pressure to keep that pad flat on the surface rotating. And if you're seeing that, okay, this isn't giving me the results, then put a bit more down pressure, give it a test spot and see, did that help at all? Because it may be that it's not the down pressure, but it's maybe just the pad and polish that you're using. Maybe you need to upgrade from a pad to a cutting disc, to a microfiber cutting pad. So it's not necessarily like, oh, it's not working, more down pressure. It's like, well, maybe if you go to a more aggressive compound, or maybe you go to a more aggressive pad, right? So don't just go on instinct, hey, it's not working, okay, bet, more down pressure. And just put more down pressure on the paint. Like that's not, in some cases, it is gonna work. In some cases, it's not. But don't by default just say, it's not working, all right, more down pressure. But I'll end the video right here. Hopefully you took some information that you can use next time you're working on your vehicle. It can be intimidating getting into polishing and actually using a polisher and a pad and all these compounds, but look, you can get it. It's all about repetition, just like anything else. You go out there more frequently, you do more practice, you kind of test a few things out, and you get more confidence and you feel better about doing it, and it just gives you more confidence to go out there and just keep on getting better. So yes, you're gonna make mistakes when you first get started. Yes, you know, you're not gonna burn the paint or anything like that, but you know, you're not gonna get the results that you want on the first try. It's gonna take some trial and error, but just stick to it because you'll get better at it. If you're interested in the tools and products, you can check the description box down below. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Give the video a thumbs up, and I'll talk to everyone on the next one. Bye-bye.